The Spanish conquest of Mexico. The fall of the Aztec Empire. They came from across the ocean, clad in steel and driven by an unquenchable thirst for gold and glory. They set foot on a land where gods walked among men, where cities shimmered on the water, and where empires were built on blood and stone. Two great leaders, Hernán Cortés and Montezuma II, would stand at the heart of a confrontation that would shake the foundations of history itself. This is the tale of ambition, betrayal, and the clash of civilizations. A story where the fate of an empire was decided by steel, strategy, and the whispers of prophecy. Chapter 1. A World on the Brink. At the heart of the Iberian Peninsula, the Kingdom of Castile had emerged as a dominant force, fueled by the ambitions of King Charles I. Spain, fresh from the Reconquista, had become a crucible of exploration and conquest, where men driven by faith, greed, and glory set sail into the unknown. Armed with steel swords, warhorses, and fire-belching arquebuses, these conquistadors believed themselves to be agents of divine will, destined to claim new lands in the name of both crown and cross. Across the ocean, the Mexica people, known to the world as the Aztecs, ruled a vast empire from their capital, Tenochtitlán, a city of temples and causeways, built upon the shimmering waters of Lake Texcoco. Here, warriors clad in jaguar pelts and eagle feathers upheld the will of their gods, offering human hearts upon the sacred altars to ensure the rising of the sun. Though their lands were divided by an ocean, fate had begun to weave their paths together. In the year 1519, Hernán Cortés, an ambitious Spanish nobleman with little to lose, arrived on the shores of the Yucatan Peninsula. He was not the first European to set foot in these lands. Previous expeditions had encountered the fierce Maya, whose abandoned cities whispered of fallen grandeur. Yet Cortés was different. Defying the orders of Governor Velázquez of Cuba, he led his band of hardened adventurers deeper into the unknown, forging uneasy alliances with local peoples who resented the oppressive rule of the Aztec Empire. Meanwhile, far to the west, Montezuma II ruled from his palace in Tenochtitlan, a city unlike any other in the world. Its towering pyramids and sprawling marketplaces dazzled those who beheld them, its canals pulsed with the movement of canoes bearing goods from across the empire. But beneath this splendor, unease stirred. Strange omens had troubled the emperor in recent years, mysterious lights in the sky, a temple catching fire without cause, and visions of armed men riding on the backs of monstrous deer. When word arrived of pale-skinned warriors landing on the coast, wielding weapons that spat thunder, Montezuma hesitated. Were they gods? Messengers of the feathered serpent Quetzalcoatl, returning as foretold? Or merely men, dangerous and deceitful? The weight of an empire rested upon his decision. And so, across jungle and desert, across mountains and rivers, the march toward destiny began. Cortés and his small army, driven by ambition and sheer audacity, pushed inland, while Montezuma watched from afar, caught between fear and calculation. Two worlds, so different yet now inexorably linked, hurtled toward a confrontation that would shake the foundations of history itself. Chapter 2. The Empire of the Sun. Long before the sails of Spanish galleons appeared on the horizon, the Aztec Empire stood at the height of its power. Known as the Mexica, the Aztecs were fierce warriors and skilled administrators who had forged a formidable alliance, the Triple Alliance, ruling over much of central Mexico. Their capital, Tenochtitlan, was an architectural marvel, a city built upon an island in the middle of a vast lake. It was connected to the mainland by massive causeways, its streets bustling with traders, warriors, and priests, its towering temples dedicated to the gods who, according to legend, had guided the Mexica to this land centuries earlier. Aznoctli, a humble farmer living in a village near the capital, marveled at the splendor of Tenochtitlan when he visited the great market of Tlatelolco. He had heard stories of how the gods had once spoken to the first Mexica rulers, of how the sun god Huitzilopochtli demanded tribute in blood to keep the world in balance. He had no reason to doubt these tales, for had the empire not prospered under this divine mandate? But beyond the glittering temples and the vast palaces of Montezuma II, storm clouds were gathering. Reports had reached the emperor of strange men with pale skin and metal garments who had landed on the shores of the east, riding on beasts never before seen in this land. Some whispered that they were the prophesied return of Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent god who had once ruled and promised to return. Montezuma II, a man both wise and deeply superstitious, watched with growing unease. Chapter 3. The Arrival of Cortés. Across the ocean, Spain buzzed with the energy of conquest. The Catholic monarchs had only recently driven the last Moors from Granada, cementing Christian rule over the Iberian Peninsula. The spirit of expansion filled the air, fueled by the promise of gold, spices, and souls to convert. The great discoveries of Christopher Columbus had opened the gates to the New World, and ambitious men like Hernán Cortés saw not only adventure but a path to unimaginable wealth and power. As Cortés stepped onto the golden shores of the Yucatan Peninsula, the air was thick with humidity, carrying the scent of salt and jungle. The dense forests whispered with the calls of unseen creatures, and the sun blazed overhead, casting long shadows over the unfamiliar land. His men, clad in gleaming breastplates and armed with Toledo steel, eyed their surroundings warily. They had heard tales of fierce warriors, human sacrifices, and temples dripping with gold. But what they saw were cities built from limestone, bustling with traders, farmers, and priests, evidence of a civilization as advanced as any in Europe. To the native peoples, these pale-skinned strangers seemed almost godlike. Their metal armor shone like the scales of a serpent, their firearms spat thunder, and their horses, creatures never before seen in Mesoamerica, moved with unnatural speed and power. But the Aztec Empire was not built on superstition alone. Montezuma II, ruler of this vast domain, had eyes and ears across the land. He received reports of these foreign invaders and debated how to act. Should he crush them like past rebels or treat them as divine envoys? Cortés wasted no time in sowing discord. He listened, learned, and exploited every weakness he found. He turned enemy against enemy, forging uneasy alliances with the Totonacs and later the fierce Tlaxcalans, who had long resisted Aztec rule. Malintzin, a woman of noble lineage taken as a slave, became his greatest asset. Fluent in Nahuatl and Maya, she bridged the worlds of conqueror and conquered, whispering secrets of Aztec politics and betrayals into Cortés's ear. To ensure his men's loyalty, Cortés made a bold move. On the shores of what would become Veracruz, he ordered his ships scuttled and burned. The flames devoured the wooden vessels, sending plumes of smoke curling into the sky. There would be no retreat, no second thoughts. Before them lay only one path, forward, into the heart of the Aztec Empire, where fate and history would collide. Chapter 4. The March to Tenochtitlan. With his newfound allies, Cortés began his march inland, a journey fraught with peril and uncertainty. The dense Mesoamerican jungles whispered with the sounds of unseen creatures, while towering volcanoes loomed in the distance like silent sentinels of an ancient world. Each step forward brought new dangers, treacherous mountain paths, sweltering heat, and the ever-present threat of ambush. Alongside his hardened soldiers, thousands of native allies, their faces painted for war, carried supplies and weapons, their chants filling the air with a sense of foreboding. In the valley of Tlaxcala, the Spaniards encountered resistance unlike any they had faced before. The warriors of the Tlaxcalan Confederation, renowned for their unmatched skill and relentless spirit, rained obsidian-tipped arrows upon them, their jaguar and eagle warriors moving like shadows across the battlefield. For days, blood soaked the earth until, at last, the Tlaxcalans, their numbers dwindling, conceded defeat. Their elders, wary but pragmatic, saw in Cortés a means to break free from the suffocating grasp of their longtime oppressors, the mighty Aztec Empire. What began as a clash of steel and macuawheel became an alliance sealed by shared ambition and necessity. As they neared the great city of Tenochtitlan, the very air seemed to shimmer with anticipation. Emissaries of Montezuma II arrived in ceremonial splendor, their feathered cloaks swaying with each measured step. They bore gifts, intricate gold masks, turquoise-encrusted shields, and jade pendants so finely carved they seemed almost alive. To the Aztecs, these were divine offerings meant to pacify the strange, bearded men. To the Spaniards, they were proof that the fabled riches of the empire were no myth but a tangible fortune ripe for the taking. The glint of gold in the sunlight only fueled their hunger, a hunger that would shape the fate of an empire. Then, at long last, Tenochtitlan revealed itself. As they crossed the great causeways, stretching like stone veins over the vast waters of Lake Texcoco, the conquistadors beheld a vision beyond their wildest dreams. Pyramid temples crowned with smoking braziers loomed over sprawling markets filled with traders and artisans. The scent of cacao and burning copal mingled in the air as canoes glided effortlessly through the city's endless canals. It was a metropolis unlike any in Europe, a city suspended between earth and water, power and prophecy. Yet beneath the beauty lay tension, for the gods of the Aztecs had foretold the arrival of pale-skinned visitors, and whether they came as messengers or harbingers of doom remained to be seen. Chapter 5. The Meeting of Two Worlds. On a day that would forever alter history, Montezuma II and Hernán Cortés met face to face, an encounter that would forever change the course of both the Old and New Worlds. Montezuma, the ruler of the mighty Aztec Empire, adorned himself in the finest garments made of quetzal feathers and shimmering gold, his appearance radiating the opulence and power of his civilization. Standing on the grand steps of his magnificent palace, he gazed down at the approaching Spanish conquistadors. Cortés, draped in shining steel armor, his face concealed behind a helm, looked up at the emperor with cold calculation. His men flanked him, the presence of foreign steel and foreign intent starkly contrasting the lush world of the Aztecs. The two leaders exchanged words, Montezuma, uncertain yet respectful, and Cortés, ever the opportunist. He gifted the emperor ornate presents, while the Aztec leader reciprocated with lavish offerings of gold and intricate artifacts, marking a brief moment of peace between two worlds on the brink of collision. Montezuma, though wary, welcomed the Spaniards into the heart of his empire. He granted them quarters in the grand city of Tenochtitlan, providing them with palaces to stay in, while hosting them with lavish feasts filled with exotic foods and fine wines. The emperor, guided by both his politeness and a deep sense of religious duty, sought to understand these mysterious visitors. He was aware of prophecies that spoke of gods returning from across the sea, and he began to entertain the idea that Cortés and his men might be the very fulfillment of this prophecy. Meanwhile, Cortés, ever strategic and calculating, saw the opportunity to gain control of the situation. He knew that to subdue the Aztec Empire, he needed not only power but leverage, and there was no greater leverage than Montezuma himself. Seizing the moment, Cortés cunningly took Montezuma II hostage within his own palace. With the emperor held under his control, Cortés was able to manipulate the city's leadership, forcing Montezuma to act as a puppet ruler, doing the bidding of the Spaniards. Though Montezuma still held a measure of authority, his people soon began to realize that their once mighty emperor was powerless in the face of the foreign invaders. Resentment simmered beneath the surface, as the Aztec nobility and commoners alike started to question the emperor's leadership and his seemingly strange behavior. The once unshakable power of Montezuma's rule began to crumble as tensions within Tenochtitlan mounted. The people of the Aztec Empire, proud of their military strength and their deeply ingrained traditions, could not fathom the idea of submitting to foreign invaders, let alone seeing their emperor reduced to a mere figurehead. As their frustration grew, the inevitable rupture between Montezuma's people and the Spanish invaders loomed ever closer. Despite his continued efforts to maintain order and appease his people, Montezuma could not escape the growing tide of dissent, a dissent that would soon erupt into violence, marking the beginning of the end for the Aztec Empire. Chapter 6. The Fall of Tenochtitlan. The fragile peace shattered in the year 1520, when Spanish forces, in the absence of Cortés, brutally massacred unarmed Aztec nobles during a sacred religious festival. This shocking betrayal ignited a furious uproar within Tenochtitlan. The Aztecs, once so proud of their empire, now turned against their Spanish guests. Their emperor, Montezuma II, who had once been revered as a living god, found himself seen as a cowardly traitor. His own people, filled with rage, pelted him with stones, a humiliation that marked the beginning of the end for the Aztec rule. Not long after, Montezuma died under mysterious circumstances. Some say it was at the hands of the Spaniards, others that he was a victim of his own people's wrath. The Spaniards were forced to flee the city in a desperate retreat known as La Noche Triste, the Night of Sorrows. On the night of June 30, 1520, as they attempted to escape across the causeways of Tenochtitlan, they were ambushed by Aztec warriors. In the chaos, many Spaniards perished, drowned in the lake's waters, weighed down by the gold they had plundered. The once proud conquistadors, who had been so sure of their victory, now faced an unexpected and brutal reversal of fortune. However, Cortés was far from finished. He regrouped with his remaining forces, including thousands of indigenous allies who had grown disillusioned with the Aztecs and sought revenge. By the fall of 1521, Cortés returned with a vengeance, laying siege to the capital. The Aztecs, already weakened by smallpox and hunger, found themselves unable to withstand the relentless Spanish assault. For months, the Spaniards battered the city, cutting off vital supplies and burning everything in their path. The once thriving metropolis, with its towering temples and grand markets, began to crumble. Disease, starvation, and the unyielding pressure from the Spanish forces gradually broke the Aztec resistance. The once great city, which had boasted over 200,000 inhabitants, was now a shadow of its former self. On August 13, 1521, Tenochtitlan finally fell. The Spanish forces breached the last defenses, and the Aztec Empire, a civilization that had dominated much of Mesoamerica for centuries, was reduced to ruins. The once mighty temples were desecrated, the people subjugated, and the heart of the Aztec Empire was forever silenced. The defeat of Tenochtitlan marked the end of an era and the beginning of a new chapter in Mexican history, one that would be defined by Spanish colonial rule. Chapter 7. A New World. With the fall of Tenochtitlan, the capital of the mighty Aztec Empire, the Spanish conquistadors, led by Hernán Cortés, claimed victory. But this triumph was only the beginning of a turbulent new chapter in history. The Aztec city, once a marvel of engineering and culture, fell after a brutal siege lasting nearly 3 months in the year 1521. The once proud empire crumbled, and the Spanish forces took control. However, the conquest of the Aztecs was not solely marked by military force. Disease, most notably smallpox, played a devastating role in weakening the native population. In less than a year, a population of several million was reduced by nearly 90%, paving the way for Spanish dominance. Yet, even in the aftermath of such destruction, the Aztec people's legacy did not vanish entirely. Though their great temples were razed and their sacred rituals outlawed, the heart of Aztec culture persisted. The Spanish sought to erase their religious beliefs, but the Mexica gods found new expressions, subtly woven into Catholic traditions. The Nahuatl language, once the exclusive tongue of the Aztec nobility, continued to be spoken across the land, shaping the linguistic landscape of modern Mexico. This fusion of Aztec and Spanish elements would become the foundation for a new cultural identity, one that blended the old and the new in ways both subtle and profound. As the Spanish began to carve out their empire, they divided the vast Aztec territory among themselves, establishing the colony of New Spain. The encomienda system was introduced, allowing Spanish settlers to extract tribute and labor from the indigenous people. While this system was intended to benefit the Spanish crown and further their dominance, it often led to brutal exploitation and abuse of the native population. This tragic exploitation of the Aztec descendants was part of a larger pattern of colonization, which reshaped the social and economic structures of the region for centuries to come. The collision of the old Aztec world with the Spanish invaders resulted in a cultural transformation of monumental proportions. It was not merely a story of conquest, but one of adaptation, survival, and syncretism. The mestizo population, a blending of Spanish and indigenous bloodlines, began to emerge, creating a new social and cultural dynamic in the heart of the Americas. Over time, the distinct identities of both the Aztecs and the Spaniards would intertwine, creating a unique Mexican culture, characterized by a rich mix of indigenous traditions and Spanish influence. From the ashes of the Aztec Empire, a new world was born, one that would influence the course of history for generations. The conquest of Mexico is a testament to both the destructive power of imperialism and the resilience of the human spirit. The story of Tenochtitlan's fall is not only a tragic one, but it also marks the beginning of an era of cultural exchange and transformation. The echoes of that fateful encounter still resonate today, reminding us of the enduring legacies left by both the conquerors and the conquered, as well as the complex and often painful process of creating a new world from the ashes of the old. And that's it, thanks for watching. If you enjoy exploring historical worlds, be sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on more exciting stories.